Hello and welcome to the business Q&A sessions with Meeta and Tosh. Sorry, we're a couple of minutes late. Hi, Tosh. How are you doing?
Morning, Meeta. I'm good. Yourself?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Good to be back. And such a key topic. It was World Mental Health Day on Sunday, the 10th of October.
Yeah. And you know what? It's been a buzzword for quite a while. And more than a buzzword, it's something that people just become more and more aware of, more open about. This isn't some sort of taboo subject anymore, and people want to address it, and people actually care about these sorts of things. But at the same time, there's different perspectives on these things, and we're going to go through all of those challenges today, and answer whatever questions anybody's got, right?
Yeah, very much so. You know, I think the space we've had during the pandemic to reflect on our mental well-being, because it's been so challenged, actually has shown that there are far more mental health challenges for people now than ever. And we'll talk about some stats down the line. But I think what's also really important to consider for organizations is that mental well-being and being aware of that as an employer is a really, apart from being humane, is an important retention tool. And it's important for us to understand that men and women may experience mental health challenges, but they'll be very different. And it's important to have the right understanding of how different people show their mental strain in an organization. So
I'm also going to be a bit controversial about it, which is that there's a spectrum.
Really?
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, just let's mix it up a bit. Let's chuck a little grenade in there, which is, look, there's a spectrum of stress and mental health, and people can assume that it's at the extreme end. You know, it doesn't. You know, in terms of what level it is. So it's just about giving you the right tools to measure where people are. I understand that they handle things in different ways and are capable of taking things in different ways. And then what are the tools in place? What are the best advice we can give on how to handle those workplace anxiety, stresses, whether it's stress as in just stress about work, or whether it's depression or anxiety because of things going on at work, or even in personal life. We're going to talk about those things today, right?
Yeah, and you know what's really interesting about that word stress is, well, there's good stress and bad stress, and you know, it's helping our people understand where that line is and where we have to get involved. And you know, just done a webinar on attracting the best talent and retaining it. Taking care of your people when they're in your business will be the difference between them staying or going. And we all know how hard and impossible it is to find good people right now. So this isn't just, as we said, would be nice. This is an essential part of anyone who's a business owner or a people leader to get a handle on. I just, you know, it's a no-brainer commercially and personally and professionally.
People go where they're welcome and they stay where they're valued.
Like that, very much. So Tosh, you had a poll. Have you published that yet?
I haven't yet. Let me put that on there now. So and while I'm putting that up there, Meeta, I'll just let everybody do the quick walkthrough of how this works in case they didn't know already. Which is, look, this is a live Q&A session. We are here for you. Okay, I know our topic is mental health today and the issues that you're facing. This is designed to be an interactive session. There's a chat box on the right. Meeta, if you can put a quick hi in there, please put in your problems in there, put in the difficulties or the challenges you're facing. You know, you've got two experts here that are really putting their heart on their sleeve and their minds together to figure out solutions that to problems or difficulties you're facing right now.
Yeah.
Our promise always is to answer every single question you put in the chat today, live. And if it requires something a bit more extensive or a bit more of maybe a deep dive, give us a call. Take it offline. Call either of us. Call both of us.
Yeah.
Our contact numbers are. Go out with these. We're available on WhatsApp as well. Connect with us on LinkedIn. There's so much free stuff we put out there just to put some good out there. Don't get me wrong, we're not charities. We do a lot of business as well.
Yeah.
We realize that people just need access to information. I don't mean the internet, something where the information is there and it's deciphered down in a way that is snackable, so you know what to do with it, right?
And you can take it away and apply it straight away. That's my real driver for sessions like this, is that, we all sit, sometimes we have a team, sometimes we have managers, sometimes people are working in sole roles and, they have a thought, they have an idea, but they want a sanity check. We're great for that as well, these sessions. So let's dig into it. There's 3 areas that we were talking about today. I feel like they're going to blend into each other. There's 4 areas actually, but the first
we were just about to talk about the poll.
Oh, go on. Are you going to do
That's because you asked about it. That was all. So we've got the poll going. We'll look at it at the end. look, this is designed a little bit between different clients say to us, and experiences when they're dealing with these sorts of situations. So let us know what you're dealing with, right? And as I say, put them in the chat. So the question at the moment is what's your view on workplace mental health? Is it a pain to deal with? Is it, oh God, I need the work to get done. I haven't got time for this. Or do you use a capability process? So you're going through formal steps to figure out what they can and can't do, and maybe there's some reduction in hours or what have you to accommodate in that way. Do you just go to the doctor? Ask the expert, find out exactly what the condition is, what they can and can't do, and what adjustments might be necessary. If the person is disabled because of mental health issues, then you have an obligation to make reasonable adjustments.
Yeah.
Or do you just have a chat? How about grown-up conversation with the employee and say, what's going on?
Yeah.
Okay, how can we make this work? And start there. And then maybe that seems a sensible way, actually. And then if what the employee suggests works, then great. But remember, the employee isn't a doctor. So what they say might not work. So I'd be very interested to know, what you think at the moment. It is taking that very practical step. 80% say they're agreeing the steps with the employee. Next is 20% use the capability process, and we haven't got votes on the others yet. So maybe we'll give that some time and get some more data on that by the end of this webinar, which is 30 to 40 minutes long. So we're aiming to finish by about 20 to 12.
Yeah. We say that, and sometimes we go on, but we
do it in one breath.
Andrew, thank you, Tosh.
Relax.
It's one of the areas in an organisation that fits with culture is mental well-being. I'm getting a bit of feedback, so I'm just moving back a little bit. If you've got any challenges with the sound, let me know in the chat box, but hopefully that's fixed my the feedback. We're talking about work-related stress and pressure. What are the signs, how you can avoid this? That's the first thing we're going to talk about. The second is harassment and bullying and what processes you can follow and deal with. And this is so interesting that we go from stress and pressure to harassment and bullying, because what happens in a pressure cooker, or when somebody perceives their world to be a pressure cooker, is that behaviors and responses change. And all of a sudden, things like bullying and harassment that might not be there or might have been there but never addressed, it comes to the forefront. And we know as employers, we need to stamp that out to start with. But sometimes we don't see what's going on. So it's having the right processes in place to deal with it when it arises, but also to preempt it. Things like mental health first aiders, like having a safe space to call and talk about what's going on without feeling that there's going to be ramifications of what you bring up. And the third one, I think, is where you talk about next steps and capability processes, is then thinking about, well, in this world we're in now, which is creating so much mental pressure, what are the changing demands for employees and employers? What are the flexibility approaches that may work? And actually, everyone's still got to do a job and grow a successful organization. What are the rights of people, And overarching all of that is the fact that, the factors impacting us all, yes, the pandemic, the change, but individually, men and women have different reasons why they're under stress. Yes, they may all have the work-related pressure, but we know that men generally, and I'm not going to make big sweeping statements, but men generally don't necessarily talk as much, don't open up as much, don't find it as easy to share, and often don't know when their stress goes from being good stress to bad stress. Women have, we have the health issues, we have the fertility, and we have the hormonal issues. Menopause is being talked about everywhere now because the workforce is growing older. Mental issues and well-being issues are more accepted to be spoken about, and everyone talks about people when they're pregnant or when they've got elderly people to look after. But actually, a lot of women go through a lot of changes that just need support. They don't need to be in or out of the business. It just needs to be acknowledged and maybe improved. Likewise with men, sometimes they don't feel that they can talk about their stress, and we need to create a safe space for them to say, yes, we talk about menopause, we talk about menopause. Everyone's got their challenges. It's okay to come with those challenges. And hopefully what that will create is a collaborative world, like you said at the start, Tosh. What did you say? People, if you make it a great...
People go where they're welcome and they stay where they're valued.
Yeah.
And I like what you said there about being preemptive. You don't have to wait till somebody raises a grievance. As a solicitor, I always these situations come up so often.
Yeah.
With mental health issues or stress or bullying or those sorts of things. By the time they've written a grievance, can you imagine the process the person's gone to get to a point where that sometimes they feel like it's the point of no return. So maybe eyeball the situation, have a look, see what's going on, get your managers to have a look around.
Yeah.
He doesn't look quite right today. Oh, let's call him out. What's happening there? Yeah. You're actually care about your people, and that's what you're really talking about. And by having actually looking like you have their back, and you do have their back, and you're trying to find out what's going on with them, that's going to go a long way.
Yeah, and letting people know that it's not a negative if they bring up their mental well-being, because still in this day and age when it's all become so much more expected, nearly 50% of employees still feel that if they bring up their mental health challenges, that it will be career defining and challenging, that it will change their opportunities and chances at work. So as leadership, as managers, something we're doing now is advising and guiding and training people leaders on how to deal with mental well-being in the workplace, what language to use, what signs to look for. Because if you can say, you know what, I'm not in a very good space right now, and as a result, I'd like to do this and that, and I'm going to do this, people will see that it's okay. People can still be effective at work and be dealing with a mental challenge.
It's difficult as well for the employers as well, Meeta, I know everything's relative and we all do things differently, but I'm sure a lot of people connect with what I'm about to say, which is that as business owners, work bloody hard. 12, 14 hours is not unheard of in our game, So if an employee is suffering from stress because they've been working about 6 hours or something, or didn't get a particularly good night's sleep, sometimes you cannot feel sympathetic with the situation.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult scenario, but we're not cut the same way. So I guess the training for us is to be able to listen before you speak a bit. Don't form assumptions. Be a bit curious. Find out what's going on. What's it about? Because when you step back, you might get to the root of something better rather than already forming a view and then it's done. Oh, for goodness sake, what does it mean you're tired? I've got 14 hours today. This is ridiculous. I'll tell you what stress is like.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be subjective. It isn't something you can think about. You can have a well-being policy for your handbook. Or if you don't have it in the handbook, you can say, we are just delivering this well-being policy. And, we've got top 10 of what advice the World Health, what we give to employers to manage people's workplace stress. So it can be defined. You don't need to feel like this is how long is a piece of string. You can create parameters to manage and support this process and challenge for people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But it is about all of us changing our mindset a little bit and understanding the best way to achieve the outcomes, which is the human element. And also, we're still running a business.
Yeah. And, I do think that the majority of the working world want to relieve that they can talk about their mental being. Business leaders who probably face so much stress and feel they have so few people to talk to probably are relieved that they can talk about it without feeling inferior. And actually, for employees, they just feel, like you said, valued and they want to stay. So it has so much power to get this right. And, you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yep, absolutely.
We have
got a question already, Meeta, before we get stuck into our first part of it. Should we go to that question first?
Let's do it. Let's have a look. Okay. So Yvonne has asked a question. Yvonne says, if the employer has support policies in place, which the affected employee will not engage with, what is your advice? How is it possible to ensure the employee also works towards their own wellness? Brilliant question. And so relevant. You can only take the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's got to be a two-way street, right, Tosh?
Yeah, absolutely right. This is very similar, Yvonne, to the question about forcing vaccinations. Somebody asked me, can you force somebody to take a vaccination, an employee? You can't force them to, but there's consequences if they say no. And it's the same thing I'm going to say here. You can't force them to help themselves, but there's consequences if they say no. Because if you're putting reasonable steps in place and they're not performing and then doing their job, well, then you've got the right to go through a capability process and it will be a fair dismissal at the end of it if you've done everything that's reasonable. That doesn't mean everything possible, everything that's reasonable to enable that person to fulfill their full-time duties or whatever their job is. So, I think your obligation has to be absolutely clear with the employee, not in any kind of threatening way, to say, look, we put these things in place. Unless you're going to come up with something else, then we're going to end up going down a capability process. What I would also suggest, Yvonne, especially if this person's got more than 2 years or there is a disability in play here, is get a medical report. Rely on the doctor, but you've got to ask the right questions of the doctor. So this is what their job is. This is what their duties are. This is what we presented to help this person come over. Why did I say her? The question was a her from there, whatever. What is it that we can put in place to overcome these challenges that this employee is facing? And the doctor comes back with the report. Say again?
You could ask, would they recommend anything else?
Correct. What adjustments should we make? What are the things we could do? Because you've already given an idea of what the job is like. The doctor will make recommendations. Again, you don't have to do what the doctor says if they're not reasonable. But you've done then everything you can do to be able to get that sorted out. Yeah. If they refuse to work to the recommendations of the OH report, they're backing you up against the wall now, Yvonne, which means you now need to take a formal process. The formal process will be, we try to do this, we try to do that, you refuse to do that. If that's going to continue, we've got no option but to invite you to a formal capability meeting, the outcome of which may be the termination of your employment. That requires a much more detailed conversation, perhaps, Yvonne, that we might need to take offline. But if they're going to say no to everything that you're saying is reasonable, well, then you're not giving them any choice.
Yeah, and Philip has just reflected exactly my thought, which is for employers that have process in place, tried their best, have a conversation, try and understand if they're refusing, why are they refusing? Philippa says, well, what is reasonable? Nobody wants to end up in a court case. Nobody wants to end up with the damages that will go against that. And Tosh, you can, bring that to light what that is. So Philippa says, is there a definition of reasonable steps?
God, I love this bit. Lawyers love it. We'll argue all day about what's reasonable, Philip.
And we want definitives, don't we? As businesses coming to advice, we want the black and white.
Yeah, and I'm going to give it to you. So the issue, what is the definition of reasonable? This is the way I want you to look at it, Philippa. Can you stand up in front of a judge and justify the actions that you took? That's what's reasonable, isn't it? So in Yvonne's scenario, what is she going to potentially end up doing? Well, judge, we asked this person what the situation was. We asked them what we thought they should do. We asked them to go to occupational health to see how we could overcome those challenges. She said, no. Then we invited the employee to a formal capability meeting, telling them we haven't got really any other way to go because we can't make it work at work. And they still refused to, and then we terminated their employment. Judge, what else did you want us to reasonably do in the circumstances?
Yeah, and
that's it.
Yeah, and you can do capability. You could bring in an external advisor. There's so many steps you can show that you put in place, which really, belts and breeches definition of you've tried everything.
Yeah, it's not everything, Meeta. I've really got to be clear about it. It's not everything possible. It's what's reasonable in the circumstances. Reasonable tends to be according to the size, administrative resources of the company, but also reasonable is you're not a doctor, I'm not a doctor. We can make a best guess, so you should get medical support for your decision. It's very open. You're telling the employee, we're not trying to do anything, surreptitiously behind their back. When we invite to the doctor, what I normally advise clients is give them a copy, because the employees have to give a medical consent form anyway before you can get a medical report. So let's just be really transparent and let the employee know they're not really giving us any choice if they're not going to take the steps we're saying to help them.
Yeah. So I hope that's helpful. Yvonne replied, thank you, Yvonne, for the feedback. So I can't stress enough how helpful Tosh is and his expertise. And, Tosh is always available to pick up the phone to you, because what Tosh does is say you can do what you want, but you need to understand the consequences. And what we're here to do is to help you preempt and have the right systems in place so that you've always got best practice at heart and the best outcome for your organization and your people all taken care of in the way you set things up. And then if you're in a situation like this, you can come to Tosh and say, right, we've done all of this, but we're still not, out of the woods. What can we do? And
that, Meeta. Absolutely. We're both here to help in so many ways. And hopefully the proof's been in pudding the last 18 months anyway. You're welcome, Philippa. If there's anything more than that, just reach out to us. Absolutely no issue at all.
Indeed. So
hey, it's 11:24 and we're just one. What happened?
Well, look, I think we're starting to cover some stuff anyway. So in terms of signs and avoiding signs, I think I would say that first and foremost is looking at, like you say, Tosh, look up, look around, ask questions. I think having a mental health first aid is really important because they will be trained. Then have your managers within the organization also aware of signs to look for. Look for people who start disengaging. Look for people that maybe were more talkative and weren't. Look for people that start feeling poorly and don't come to work. People that their work drops and you can't understand why. Have one-to-ones, whether you have a structure of one weekly, monthly, or whatever. And you know what? If you notice something, so listen, I'd love to grab a coffee or a walk.
Be curious, absolutely. Ask and talk to people. If you see something, in their face, hey, you're right, what's happening? And don't accept the first answer.
Yeah.
You know, one of my employees, their sister was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. She didn't say anything. She came into work, face really long. I said, what's happening? She goes, oh, nothing. What's the normal thing? You say, okay, well, let's get back on with it because you've just taken their first answer. People don't want to open up that much. So, you know, be curious because you're coming from an intention of something good. Yeah. Eye contact as well, Meeta, you know, body language, they say is 93% of communication and verbal is only 7%. So look at how they're behaving. Look at the workflow. But, you know, normally the alarm bells at the very latest just come about when people are going off sick.
Yeah. And, you know, part of that, as I said, is leaders and management also being able to talk about their mental health to show that a leading by example is not a dirty word. When you have a meeting or you have a talk or a gathering, just, you know, be honest. I've had a really hard day today. You know, the first 10 minutes of my day was debriefing to, you know, my manager or my mentor or whoever they know, because I needed some perspective. And it's so good to have people in this organization that I can go and get some perspective with. And don't forget, you can do that with me, or you have our mental health first aider. So always be talking about it. Like, don't do something again. You talk at induction or you give them a piece of paper and you don't bring it back to them. Send out an email. Don't forget everyone. You know, if there's something like this you want to talk about, here's the times and places or any time in between that you can come and talk to us. Here's the support you get. You know, a lot of private medical now has free counselling access as part of it. Let your people know.
Well, your assistance programs.
Yeah. So that's what I would say. And I know because time is short, we could do a whole session on each one of these. I would really like to get to work-related harassment and bullying, because I think that when the world is a pressure cooker, the organization is under stress and pressure, things are changing. Harassment and bullying challenges seem to go up, right, Tosh?
Yeah. You know, it's I try not to get too legalistic so everyone doesn't slip into a coma with definitions, but it's quite an important one with harassment, right? Because what does it mean? You know, people have the understanding of harassment means, oh, you're bothering me or something like that, or you know, sexual harassment or something like that, or you know, if somebody's in the streets or something. Harassment in the workplace is quite a specific requirement. It doesn't require the intention of the harasser. It's about how the victim feels in the workplace, okay? Yeah. And the requirement, it says it has the purpose or effect. So I'm doing something either on purpose to upset you, or I'm doing something I don't mean to because it's a bit of banter, but that's the effect it's had on you. That's all that's required as the first thing. But it's got to be, if it's harassment in law, it's got to be on one of the 9 protected characteristics: sex, race, religion, disability, you know, all those ones I won't go into right now. So that's the first thing. It's got to be unwanted conduct because of that reason. So if I harass you, I don't know why I keep calling you a smoker. That's my example. I know you're not. If I harass you because you're a smoker, yes, I'm harassing you, but it won't be illegal because there's no law that protects smokers. Okay. So in the context of what we're talking about, especially with mental health, generally it tends to be things like disability, because mental health can be disability. If you treat somebody less favorably, or take the mickey out of them, or don't put things in place, or don't make reasonable adjustments, or if they're crying out for help and you're not doing those things, all those things can form harassment in law, which can be quite expensive.
Well, I'd love to bring up the menopause now, because we always hear about these arguments in a room about someone wanting to open a window, someone wanting to close a window, someone complaining, oh, that person's opening a window. And this is where somebody might feel subjected to harassment and bullying because they're being singled out for wanting to open a window, but the other person doesn't. Where would that sit? You know, if someone came to you as a manager and said, or a company came to you and said, oh, someone's brought a grievance because they're being singled out for wanting to open a window.
So we need to know, they need to know why, first of all, right? So if it's just an argument between 2 employees about window being open or closed, and one's feeling hot, one's feeling cold, then you would have to move somebody around, I guess, or the manager would make a call, no, it's staying open, put a jumper on, I don't know, in that sort of sense. If there is something of that sort of nature, that word reasonable is going to rear its ugly head again, Meeta. You know, because the test for harassment purposes is objective and subjective. What that means in English is...
I was going to say that's helpful. That is
what that means in English is subject is, do you feel offended that I've left the window open because of you going through menopause?
Well, no, the menopause would want the window open. So it's the other way.
Yeah. So do you feel offended that I don't want the window open?
Well, again, it depends on how much you know about me. If you don't know why, then I can't feel offended because it's personal choice, isn't it? If we're both equal,
there's no legal point of view there at all, then, because there's no harassment if that's the case. But let's say I know it.
Yeah.
Let's say I know it.
Yeah.
If I know it and I'm saying no, then it's not just about whether you feel harassed. Objectively, would a reasonable person feel harassed in those circumstances?
Got it.
So you look at the factors. If that's correct, then that's correct. So, for example, let's say I say good morning to you, and you say, "Oh, I don't like the way you said good morning to me. I feel like you're sexually harassing me. You said it with your words." And I say good morning. So subjectively, I can't argue with you, Meeta, because that's how you feel, right? Yeah. But objectively, a reasonable person is going to think that's just not correct.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things about bullying is that, again, it's really hard for organizations to identify bullying. You know, when does it go from being someone just having a go at someone as a one-off to someone who's continually having a dig at someone and that person starting to feel, you know, like they're being singled out and bullied?
It can form active behavior. It can be passive behavior, right, by excluding people or they feel excluded. It doesn't even have to be work. It could be a work do. It could be different treatment due to religions. It can be different treatment due to sex or what have you. You know, bullying is the perception of the individual on how they've been made to feel. And then again, you look at it objectively. Well, would a reasonable person feel the same way in those circumstances?
And this is where mental health comes into it, because some people have more resilience or capacity or start seeing things in different ways, depending on where they are from a mental well-being space. So it is so intertwined, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. I guess obviously as a lawyer, I'm always going to go back to the law. I guess you're going to go with what you think is right. And then if the two people are not able to compromise, or if we're not able to reach something that everybody's okay with, well, then there has to become a point where as the employer, you're going to become the parent. And then you're going to draw a line or put your foot down or whatever the phrase is. So if you're going to do that, you need to know what it is you're putting your foot down about and what powers you have to do that. So the bottom line comes down to is, do I believe that is this reasonable what this person is asking me in the circumstances? If the answer is yes, then do it.
Yeah. And I think, as you know, Philippa said, what is the definition of reasonable? But the conversations you and I are having, for some of us, maybe our audience, I know for myself, is so many of these approaches, as you said, is objective and subjective. It's, you know, if there was one thing that employers should do to make sure they're managing these harassment and bullying challenges in the right way, what would you say that is? Like, how would they approach it?
So, you know what, the number one way would always be to do something informally, right? Talk to your people about, as soon as it's raised, don't look at jumping in formal processes. See if you can talk to the two people who are the bullier and the other person. Maybe they're seeing things in a completely different way, right? Yeah. Maybe they didn't mean it, and maybe there's a compromise. First thing you always do when somebody is complaining about bullying is ask them, what do you want? What outcome are you looking for? They might not even know. I just don't want that stress. I don't want to work with that guy anymore. I don't want to do those things. Okay, well, at least we know. And then take a practical approach. If you're going to go down a formal route, that's okay as well. But generally speaking, the more informal you can keep it, the better, because everybody just wants to work together or overcome the challenge, right? I really like your idea about that officer or that person. Who's the go-to person?
Mental health.
Beef, who do they talk to? And what if the beef is with the person they're supposed to go and talk to? Who do they go to then? So I really like the different avenues you've got there. Maybe it's the employee assistance program or what have you.
Yeah.
But there's ways to overcome the bullying by addressing it head on, not just diving into a formal, worn-out grievance process. Let's go back to grown-up conversations.
That is great advice, Tosh. And as always, the most obvious stuff is always the simplest. Just be real, check in, be curious, treat everyone like a human being, treat everyone fairly. And our job as managers and people leaders, business leaders, is to facilitate that environment. And if it does feel like it's going off track, bring it back with an informal chat. I think that's brilliant. Thank you, Tosh. We've got a comment from Joellen here. Hi, Joellen. Good to have you.
We love Joellen.
Part of the problem in our experience is that people often avoid managing conflict, since that's what this is, conflict between employees. If things are nipped in the bud, then they won't go out of proportion. Yeah, brilliant.
Very true. Very true. And most people don't know how to communicate effectively. That's certainly been my experience, Joe. It's they don't know how to talk about it, they don't know how to deal about it, or there's a hierarchy, or there's some intimidation involved, or there's some ego. Just managing difficult conversations is a very important skill to have. So
informal mediation, something we train people on as well, is how to manage conflict and how to address difficult situations, and have a third-party mediator, have a process of reflection. I have to say that conflict mediation is very similar to relationship counseling. You know, it's that person not feeling seen or heard. And there are really easy processes to, you know, I've noticed, this is what I've noticed, this is what you feel, reflecting back, so people feel that they're important. And I think sometimes just being heard and feeling important in that dynamic can help overcome so many misunderstandings or intentions that weren't felt that way. But if there is a problem, then you've got the formal one to go down and start getting things into place.
And what you said there is super important, because as a result of being heard, there's a shift in your thinking. Yeah. And after a few little shifts in your thinking, the perspective in the situation, or put another way, if I was in your shoes, you know, I see it from your point of view. Then what happens? You start to move. If it's successful, you move into an area where you're looking at the mutual interest. Yeah. What is it that we really both want? Now that we've got past all the layers of crap. It's a technical term. Well, you know, once we go all past all those layers, what is the mutual interest? What do we really want to make this work? What's for you and for me? Yeah. Sometimes it requires a bit of an adjustment to get there, doesn't it?
And it's training your people on probing questions, not open and closed questions like we said, are you okay? Yes, no, but tell me about how you're doing today. Sometimes you can even have, I think what's really nice is to have almost a check-in app. You know, give your people access. One of the things we did for our people was give them an annual subscription of Headspace. I think it was something like £40 or £50. We got a deal and everyone had access. And sometimes we talk about challenges and I thought, well, you know what, I've just tried doing this. You know, why don't you try that? And it didn't mean that you're shifting the problem. Actually, you're putting more resource into helping people manage the problem. So it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be time consuming. And it is all about bringing solutions, you know. So it's helping people feel their mental well-being is important to us as an employer.
And it does really require action. You know, what Yvonne was saying earlier, we're trying all these things and they're not doing it. That employee is just stuck in the do, so to speak. She doesn't know how to get out of that situation, and that cycle just isn't helping. So there's no point understanding things. You know, it's execution, isn't it? It's the application of that knowledge that makes the difference. So do something, you know, take action and compel that person to do something as much as you reasonably can, right? Because you care, give a damn.
Yeah. So this really brings into work something that might be part of the solution is the return to work flexibility. A lot of mental health challenges are from people that have become accustomed to working a certain way, might think that they don't want to work back in the office, or that they've actually realized they don't want to work full time. And so demands have changed, employer demands have changed. Right now, there's such a massive skill shortage. Employees are having to go above and beyond what they were doing before. So there's so many things in flux here. So where can an employer, what are the rights and what are the options and how can an employer approach this for solutions for people and the organization?
If they're suffering specifically with a mental health issue or?
Well, you know, today we're talking about mental health. So I'd really like to talk about flexibility and how that could help people in a mental health area, you know, in the mental health area.
So we covered this last week, which was about flexible working rights. It applies to everybody. Any employee that's been for an employee for at least 26 weeks, right? I think, not that I've got any inside information, I think they're going to abolish that 26-week rule. I think they'll allow it from day one soon. I think that'll be one of the first things that come out of Brexit. Anyway, yes, if you know, they should accommodate this thing. The requirement for flexible working means that employees can work the way they want to if an employer can reasonably accommodate it, and the employer's obligation is to reasonably consider it. God, I'm really conscious of that word now. To really reasonably consider it, and within 3 months of that request being made, right? And they're allowed to make one request a year. Yeah. So what should they do about it? It's not difficult. Actually, it's not difficult. You can either make it work or not. The difficulty is your mindset. Oh, I can't see how that would work. Well, you've already just closed your mind to it. How can this work? How can we make this work for this person? Gets your brain thinking in a way to make the thing happen, right? And then you'll find a way, or you'll see it actually really doesn't work. But at least you've fully considered it. That should be partly with your own common sense, consultation with the employee, because if you can figure out what they want, then that works well, right? Yeah. And then going down that path. Otherwise, you get medical advice, figure out what can work, but either works for the business or it doesn't. It's the bottom line.
And what that, for me, sums up is actually, it's not what the problem is, but actually it's how you as an employer facilitate open conversation, a fair and reasonable approach to resolving it, always representing the organization's requirements and you know, best practice as well, and making sure you're achieving the objectives. and therefore hoping for a win-win. And if you apply that and you teach that and you're consistent in that, that will remove the risk of being taken to court or constructive dismissal or anything that might be seen as not reasonable. Is that fair to say, Tosh? Is that
100%? That's right. 100%. That's right. I mean, look, I'm obviously always talking about avoiding courts, but it isn't just about the consequence; it's about doing the right thing, right?
Yeah.
And that means the right thing by your employee and by you as well. By the way, you also have rights here as an employer or manager of people. So it's about fitting how that can fit the business. It's not doing anything possible. I said earlier, it's about doing what's reasonable.
Yeah.
And that's what that and justify.
Yeah, and organisational profits, deadlines, and objectives are not a dirty word. That is what your organisation is there to achieve. Do you then put that ahead of your employees' mental well-being? Like, that's, I think, what people worry about is when they say, well, this is what we need, and because of where you are at the moment, you can't deliver that. That's when you have that sensible conversation around, well, what can you deliver? And can I, fill the gap with somebody else or something else in the meantime?
Yes. And also, if an employee is saying, I can't do my job, you need to really consider about what medical evidence supports that before you make some decisions, because presumably you employed that person to do a job, to work certain hours. But it's a little bit like what we were talking about earlier, an employee coming back from maternity leave and requesting flexible working. You didn't employ the person to work 3 days a week. Now we are obligated to look at it. We look at it and it works.
And, Tosh, we're already at 11:41. So I think what we should do is just reflect on the last point, which is all around the factors that may bring up this requirement for a process. Mental well-being because of personal demands and personal circumstances changing.
Yeah.
Pregnancy or menopause, which actually, yes, affects the female, but also affects the male partner at home and may be impacting both in some way. But really, it's about being informed and being looking up and looking out and being curious. I really like that. You said it at the start, and I'd love to finish up with that, Tosh, which is be genuine and curious about your people and making sure that they're okay. Because if they're okay, you're okay, your organisation is okay.
And I'll finish off with what I said right at the beginning, which is people go where they feel welcome and they stay where they feel valued. So that's a principle for all of us, professionally and personally, right?
Yeah, indeed. Love that, Tosh. And I think we could definitely talk about this forever. But if there are more thoughts or specific scenarios that you've got that you want to talk about, like Tosh said, reach out, ask us. We've got lots of experience, expertise, and up-to-date advice that we've been giving our client network. So shall we end the poll and talk about the results, Tosh?
Yeah, so we've got at the poll is your view on workplace mental health, and the issue that they're talking about is agreeing steps with the employee. That's what we had before. That was 75%. Equally, 12% is they ask the doctor what to do, which is also a sensible approach, absolutely. Yeah. Or they use the capability process. Yeah. Inevitably, the capability process, if it ends up potentially looking at termination, will also include asking the doctor anyway. So again, all good, and nobody's saying it's a pain to deal with. So that's also good.
Good. Right. Well, I think on that note, we'll end the poll, and that everyone should be able to see the results on that. We've got some. Oh, thank you, Joelle, and thanks for saying it's excellent. We hope it's been valuable to you all. I'm back here next week at 11 a.m. I think Tosh is on hiatus, Joelle, and I might be calling you. And we'll see you next Thursday at 11. And thanks all for joining, Tosh. As always, a pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye.